Good evening, and welcome back to another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio, and now sponsored by or powered by our first sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody. You might as well buy them from us and help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you. I am your host, Royce White, and I am here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota, for another episode 36. The date is, what's the date today? April 24th, the year of our Lord, 2023. Um, had a great interview. Had a great family and friends interview last Friday with Maj Toure. If you didn't get the chance, you should go back and watch our the interview with Maj Toure, who is the founder of an organization or a movement called Black Guns Matter. You can find him on most social media platforms. He's a very intelligent and inspiring young black patriot. And we see few and far between, especially in today's mainstream content zeitgeist, right? I thought it was inspiring to hear his story and his take on a number of things. And it got me to thinking. It went back, I looked at some of the comments and I'm all guns blazing today. I mean, we got to get right down to the nitty gritty of a very important issue, very couple important issues. And that's why the title for today's episode is Racism, George Floyd, and Reparations. Now, I'm going to get the bullshit out of the way so I don't give you a chance to scurry off and run under your Fox News Rhino rock. I'm going to give you I'm going to get the bullshit out of the way so that um, I don't afford you the opportunity to turn off the discussion before we even get rolling. Number one, is racism the most important issue in America? No, of course not. Has racism been used by the mainstream establishment, the mainstream media institutions, or the media industrial complex to foment division and forward their own agenda in terms of American politics? Absolutely, 100%. Has racism been used historically to create a sort of a pretext for globalism? 100%. Going back to World War II and even before that. Is racism um, uh, something that is often uh, exaggerated and embellished for shock and awe, for a shock factor, especially in the media, but even in common conversation, even when it comes to social media platforms, even when it comes to how it's reported on in schools and so on and so forth? Absolutely. Does that mean that we should disregard racism as a conversation altogether? Does that mean that we don't have to take a serious look at the implications of racism? And even more importantly, is it not incumbent upon us to separate the fake racism, the predatory use of race and racism from the very real racism that does exist to this day out in the open from a person like Bill Gates or Yuval Noah Harari, and the list goes on and on. Racism that is more left leaning, liberal racism that we can't even discuss if we want to disregard a conversation about racism altogether? I would say yes. Number two, was George Floyd an exemplary citizen? No, of course not. Did George Floyd have a history of crime or criminal behavior? Yes. Was George Floyd on drugs that day? Was George Floyd somebody who had a documented use of drugs, illicit drugs? Absolutely. Were there a number of things that George Floyd could have done differently had he chose to on the day that he was murdered or killed? Absolutely. Does that mean that we should take the George Floyd situation and disregard it as entirely a product of George Floyd's choices? Does that mean that we should hear the name George Floyd and automatically think whoever and automatically draw this dichotomy between people who see the wrong in what was done and people who see that George Floyd was to blame for his own murder? Does that mean that we should ultimately give over our citizenship to a police state? that we should accept a police state, that because of how George Floyd's narrative was spun in the media, how George Floyd's narrative was used by the left to again push their own political agenda, and even furthermore, how the interaction or dynamic between black men and the cops writ large is used to push and forward a political agenda. Uh, does that mean that when we hear the name George Floyd or when we see these situations, we should immediately rebut them in their entirety? No, it's lazy, it's dishonest, it's intellectually lazy, and it's going to cost us dearly. It has already cost us dearly, but it's going to really cost us dearly in the near future, and I'm going to talk about that at length today. And finally, reparations. Are black people still enslaved today? No, of course not. Slavery was abolished. Were the was the premise in which in with which slavery was abolished the United States Constitution and in many ways the Hebrew Bible? Absolutely, absolutely. Was slavery or is slavery used often to attempt to delegitimize America as a whole and its founding ideals? Yes. And eventually that becomes a slow encroachment on freedoms and the Bill of Rights and the Constitution itself. The Constitution that affords people inalienable rights granted to them by a creator. Absolutely. No doubt. No doubt about it. Is slavery often used as a cultural wedge issue between black people and white people in this country? Absolutely. No doubt. Would it be ridiculous to make the claim that all white people should pay a extra tax, a personal tax for being white for slavery, that form of reparations? Absolutely, that would be ridiculous. Nobody who talks about reparations with any salt, would make the claim that all white people should just start paying taxes to black people. And you kind of show that you're a bit of a pussy, for lack of a better term, when your immediate response is, I'm white, I didn't own slaves. I'm white, I didn't own slaves. I wasn't there during slavery. Why should I have to pay for reparations? And we're going to get into that as well because I'm sick of it. I'm sick of the bullshit, and we're going to separate the weak from the strong. We're going to separate the true from the false. We're going to separate the honor from the dishonorable, and we're going to continue to do it. If you don't like it, now you can click off because we got through all the bullshit. We got through all the bullshit. Everybody knows, everybody's aware, everybody's willing to acknowledge how race has been used as a sort of three-card Monty, black versus white, while we make off with the green. But let's not be mistaken about where has legitimate teeth. And let's acknowledge those teeth. And even let's use those teeth to help recruit black people under a rightful auspice into a movement they should rightfully be in, which is the American conservative movement, which is the American Republican Party. But there's something real dangerous happening here. And I'm going to explain it. I'm going to get into it now. I'm going to show you examples of how we're handicapping ourselves by letting these neocon rhinos who are controlled opposition present this outer bastion of racism that they really don't even believe in themselves for the most part, in my opinion. They're doing it as a political strategy to keep a stronghold on the corrupt status quo. Now, is there legitimate racism throughout the country and throughout the Republican Party still? Absolutely. And any of your black conservatives out there who try and dance around that fact or who go out of their way to dance around that fact, they're in on it. I'm just going to tell you right up front, they're all in on it. They're in on the scam. There's a reason why the great Steve Bannon has gone out of his way to enlist people like me into the movement to help young black men, young Hispanic men all across this country see the value of their citizenship and thus the scam that's being run on this country to devalue their citizenship. There's a reason why he's doing that. There's a reason why he's done that. If you don't believe in the political if you don't believe in the political strategy in the mind of a person like Steve Bannon and the conservative movement, you're probably in on it. And you're in the movement, you're probably in on it, right? I don't know what game you're playing at. I don't know a better political strategy mind in the entire world when it comes down to just pure, X's and O's. Let's go back to the front. Racism. Where is the real racism? Where is the real where was the real racism historically? Came from a European intellectual tradition, but was a part of a much bigger tradition throughout human history where certain people find themselves separating themselves, usually along a power line or to maintain some sort of power or to insulate themselves within a small group of people with power that they can equally distribute power to in a more efficacious way by saying those people, and those people are all really different than us on this basis. And thus, you guys all get a second tier of access to whatever the case may be, right? It's radical materialism to the max. And it wasn't Christian, it wasn't godly, it wasn't righteous, it was radical materialism. It was we're going to try and covet a bigger piece of the pie based on some arbitrary measurement. And oftentimes that arbitrary measurement is the most convenient thing for people to draw on, which is your appearance, right? Sometimes it's tall people, sometimes it's black people, sometimes it's fat people. I don't know. There's always a way to be able to distinguish yourself from another group of people based on physical appearance. That's just easy. Now, the color of your skin is one of the stark. I mean, what's the biggest organ on the human body? It's the skin. We're human organisms, right? I mean, it's not really that fucking difficult to parse out. The biggest organ on the human of the human body is the thing you see most. It's the thing that sticks out the most when you look at a person across from you. This is why skin color has often been that dividing line. So we understand the history of it, I would hope. But even the history's been marred somewhat, and I get that. And black people got to cut the shit, okay? There's been plenty of times where in Europe, many white early European civilizations enslaved and brutalized other white Europeans within an intercontinental or even at that time intertribal, little proximity. We've seen it multiple times. The Roman Empire, yeah, they went and subjugated people all throughout, Asia Minor and some other places as well. But the Roman Empire brought the fist down, the hammer down on their own people right there in Europe, first and foremost. And then they fought against the Carth Empire. And what do you think they did to the Carths when they beat them? Right? Was it physical bondage, slavery? Probably somewhat, yeah. But it was more so an oppressive sort of dominance that culture or that empire took over the other empire, and that happens. That happens throughout history. We see it. We see it. We see it in the first Roman-Jewish war. And anytime I talk about Israel, I'm not shilling for Israel. I mean, I think Israel has allowed the Jewish people and the Jewish identity to be used in the same way the black bourgeoisie have allowed the black identity to be used. And it's gonna cost them. It's gonna cost the black community. It already has, and it will continue to until it's remedied. But when I talk about the origins of Israel or the legitimacy of the nation of Israel, I go back to the history. I go back to the history that most don't really want to deal with. And it's not a pro-Palestinian history. I'm just going to tell you. And I'm not pro how the nation of Israel treats the Palestinians. And I'm not pro Hamas. You can be one or the other. I mean, you don't have to be one or the other. I'm just an honest guy who can look at a situation and look at the pitfalls of both sides with great ease because I don't have a stake in it. And my identity, my personal pride and ego isn't attached to it. It's not make or break. It's not do or die to stand on one side of the line. And that doesn't mean I'm lukewarm. That doesn't mean my yes isn't a yes and my no isn't a no. My yes and my no is a no, I will not take some cookie cutter position on major global defining political issues. And my yes is my yes. I will say what I think despite what the crowd wants because I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of the crowd. Throw your tomatoes, prepare your crosses, prepare for my sword. Let's get down to business. When I look at the history of Israel and we talk about the legitimacy across time, there was a time in the earliest days of the nation of Israel or even Judea when the Romans still had dominion over Israel. This was after Christ was killed. About 70 years after Christ was killed was the first Roman-Jewish war, and by this time, Paul and Peter and some of the apostles had made their way had traveled all the way to Rome, evangelizing and turning much of through Asia Minor and Southern Europe and places like this into Christians. They had evangelized, and that was great. Um, Back there in Israel, the Jews who were still living in Israel had a problem with the Roman tax. Funny that our taxation has gotten to the point that it is today, and we go out of our way to spend much of our tax money to defend Israel and the Jewish identity. But the first war that was fought after Christ between the Jews and the Romans was based on taxes, and the Jews saying, "Hey, this tax is tyrannical." Um, and there's probably other cultural mechanisms that went into play in that little conflict as well. Regardless, after the first Roman-Jewish war, which the Jews fought valiantly and ultimately lost, they were exiled. Right? They were exiled into the diaspora, and as a punishment, all of the Jews who weren't exiled, or any Jews who straggled behind or may have went into hiding in what is today regarded as Israel, the Roman Empire renamed Israel um, Syria Palestina. Yeah, that's right. They renamed Israel. Israel was already there. It was on the map. You can go back and you can look through the Roman documents. You can look at their maps. You can look at the history. Israel was there. Judea was there. They fought a war. The Jews get exiled, and they renamed the place Syria Palestina. This is the first time that Palestine really comes into prominence in that particular area, right? So that was clearly political. So when you hear a person like Bibi Netanyahu, who's a spy, who's a killer, who has his own game going on, as many people do, Vladimir Putin, Assad, Kim Jong-un, Joe Biden, Xi Jinping, they all got their own individual game going on. But when you hear them reference history, and when you hear Bibi say that Israel was ours to begin with, there's legitimacy there. What happened afterward, there's legitimate debate to be had, and we should have it. And anytime we jerk ourselves and shy away from the argument and run for the hills, we're cowards. Okay. Now I go through that to go back to the point that yes, there is a real racism out there. There is a real racism throughout history. There is a real racism that has seemed to divide nations and people and continents, and whatever the case may be. Yeah, that's out there. It's in the history books. We got to admit it. Should we let that distract us from the corruption of today, the evil and wickedness of today, or the use of it in wicked and evil ways today? No, we don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. And one of the ways it's been used or misused is that both the neocon rhino and liberal establishment, the neocon liberal order, knows that they can always go to racism to maintain the divide of the people, to stop them from uniting against the corrupt status quo. It's like the well that never runs dry. It's the gift that keeps on giving. And the only way you could arguably justify that it's a well that never runs dry, or it's a gift that keeps on giving, is because there is some genuine racial animus between the people. Because if it wasn't, they wouldn't be able to continuously draw on it to keep us separated. And that's what this show's trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do. Because I'm a black man. My grandmother's Norwegian. She's whiter than most of you. And even in the Aryan racial superiority hierarchy, my Norwegian family would be more white than many of the people watching this show. It doesn't get no more true white than Norwegians. Adolf Hitler and the Nazis, they admired the Norwegians. They admired the Scandinavians. They thought of the Scandinavians as true white, which is a weird kind of identity crisis of its own regard, right? I mean, why these Germanic people looked at themselves and went, we're not white enough. It's those blonde hair, blue-eyed Vikings, they're the real deal. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. It's strange. It's strange. And I don't find myself a benefactor of that history. It's just a history. And I say it to say, I'm a black man, Mexican heritage. I'm a Mexican man, but I'm also a Norwegian man. And my grandmother is, as one of my grandmothers. My other grandmother was Mexican, and then I have another two grandmothers who were black. But if you saw my grandmother today, you would think that's a white woman for sure. Now, actually, she was half black. Her mother was a first-generation immigrant from Norway, and her father came from Arkansas, came from Kentucky, came through the slave, the slavery South. I say that because I can talk to you about these issues with comfort. I'm not tied to it either way. I'm just going to give it to you objectively. And the objective truth is there's a racism out there. And even more importantly, there's a racism out there we need to really acknowledge. And anytime you all out there say, well, let's not talk about racism anymore, then maybe it'll go away. How do you think the racism is going to go away because you just stop talking about it? What kind of weird resignationist scam are you running on yourself? If you have cancer in your ball sack, if you just stop thinking about the cancer, does it go away? No, no, it doesn't. No, if you have a bad relationship in your family, in your immediate life, maybe, or in your workplace or wherever, if you just stop talking to that person, does that tension and animosity go away? Maybe sometimes, probably of one of your own doing or your loss of interest in it. But the tension really, if somebody has done a wrong to you, a significant wrong, the only way it goes away is through forgiveness. And in Christianity, we know that forgiveness and repentance are very closely connected. I mean, that's Christian, that's fundamental Christian doctrine. Repentance and forgiveness are closely intertwined. In fact, whether or not somebody else forgives you through the grace of God in Christ, you are owed a repentance either way. You have to repent for your own wrongdoings either way. Now, the white people of today in America, whatever white is, again, I said last episode, I don't even know what they really mean by white. I know what the Aryan thought is about whiteness, that the further you go north in Europe, the more true white you are, and the more pure blood you are. But when we talk about whiteness in this sort of socio-political context today, I don't know what they mean. I don't know what they mean. You're talking Irish, you're talking Italian, you're talking Eastern European or Baltic. Are you talking Scandinavian? Are you talking Russian? Are you talking Spanish, British, Anglo-Saxon? I don't know. In America, all those people are regarded as white. In Europe, all those people are regarded by nationality. And in this part of the nuance, there's a strange laziness that happens around race, nationality, and ethnicity. Three different words mean three different things sometimes. Sometimes they're the same. I don't know. That's the ambiguity of language that many people that is lost on many people. And we just brush by it like, let's not sort that out. Maybe one day we'll do a deep dive into race, nationality, and ethnicity because it's an interesting one, and it's certainly interesting how it's used. But I don't want to do that today. The real racism that black people in America need to address once and for all is not the outer bastion of racism in the Republican Party that is effectively trying to keep black people out of the Republican Party so they can keep losing. Okay. The racism we need to be worried about first and foremost is that of a Bill Gates, right? A Bill Gates, this liberal racism, this soft bigotry of low expectations, this kind of perennial white guilt. We need to address this because it just masquerades around like it cares about black people or black welfare or the prosperity or freedoms or justice of black people. I mean, it's completely a scam. We see it first and foremost with the LGBTQ community. They view themselves as the black people of today. In fact, they view that their history is just as oppressed as black people's history. You could find many people from the LGBTQ community, trying to obfuscate and passively say it. Oh no, we've been oppressed too. All people are oppressed under the white tyrannical patriarchy. But really, even to suggest it is purely disrespectful. But they've been able to get away with that because so many Republicans don't want to talk about the history of racism whatsoever. So now you can't properly separate out how the LGBTQ has tried to co-opt a legitimate oppression that is on the record, and we've all seen the blood is in the soil right now. There were no LGBTQ slaves. There was no LGBTQ segregation. Your sexual preference is not an immutable quality. Skin is the biggest organism in the human body. So when you look at somebody, the color of their skin, their appearance is an immutable characteristic. And at different times, a person like my grandmother, who appears to be white, but she's actually half black, could walk into a community and be perceived as white and be bullied or harassed or thought to be out of place because of her white skin. And the same goes for black people in a different circumstance, or being stopped by a cop or whatever the case may be, being profiled, whatever. That makes that quality immutable, something that you can't do anything about, like me being tall. Being 6'8" is an immutable characteristic. Being 5'8" is an immutable characteristic. Now, it just so happens there are a lot more people who are 5'8" than there are that are 6'8". So it's a different immutable characteristic, but immutable nonetheless. Who you're fucking, who you're having sex with, how you like to identify, or which traits you find more prominent in your pantheon of human identity. Those things are not immutable. Those are things you have to actually tell someone in order for them to even know, in order for them to start to create an opinion around, right? Other than that, it's speculation. If I see a bald-headed black man who's 6'8", that's a bald-headed black man who's 6'8". He'd have to tell me. Now, he could tell me, hey, I'm Polynesian. I'm actually not black, or I'm Native American, or whatever the case may be. But I can start to deduce down credible assumptions from people's appearance. And there are some credible assumptions. Like, again, if you're 250 pounds, I could deduce that you probably have some problems with eating an impulse. Yeah, being fat is not genetic. That's a lie. The predisposition for being fat may be genetic, combination of psychology, body build, heritage, and things like that. No doubt, yeah. But the becoming fat is certainly not purely genetic. And the black woman, again, using race in American politics to forward bullshit agendas, the black woman who the Joe Biden administration just brought on to say that obesity is purely genetic. These are the ways that race is being used in an illegitimate agenda that we need to address. Black people, the welfare state. What did the welfare state give you? What was the welfare state intended to do? What did the war on drugs give you? What was the war on drugs intended to do? What did the Civil Rights Act give you? And what was it intended to do? Intended to do. These are questions. Why is Bill Gates, in collaboration with a bunch of other international omnisexual elites, saying that population growth isn't a problem writ large? Planet looks like it's going to peak out around 10 billion people. We could probably handle that. That's not the problem. The problem is rapid population growth in places that can't sustain it. And then he goes to an infographic with all Arab and African countries. Guys, that's eugenics. That's white, liberal, technocrat eugenics. That's what it is. And he's so confident that you're stupid as fuck. He's so confident that you black people are caught up on police brutality, and that you white people are harboring your racial animus, that he can say it right out in the open. And you'll spend more time arguing about that than the real danger and the real present threat that lies there under the surface, which is that technocrats, they only think about immutable. And first it'll be black skin, and then it'll be if you're a little bit too tall or small or fat, and then it'll be if you're disabled, and then it'll be if you're a little bit too outspoken, and then it'll be if you're a little bit too strong or aggressive, and then it'll be we're going to kill all you dumb motherfuckers because nobody's left to stop us. You spent too long arguing. You spent too long bickering. And here is where I want to draw. Let's draw down on George Floyd specifically. Get to the good shit. Let's go George Floyd right here in the opening lance, right? Since I've come into the movement, I constantly hear, why did you lead the protest during the George Floyd? Why? George Floyd was a criminal. George Floyd was on drugs. George Floyd was this. George Floyd was that. It's very clear what took place here in America. It's very clear how we lost this country. I mean, some of your conservative pundits might not want to say it. They know it. They want to dance around it because politics in America is a numbers game. And everybody wants to say the thing that the crowd will either A, be able to understand, and B, be willing to accept, and even C, uh, be enthusiastic about. It'll generate a level of enthusiasm that then translates into some type of loyalty, right? So everybody gets kind of conditioned in saying the thing that people want to hear. And that's how your kid with the afro, the Tennessee state legislator, he comes out on the floor basically uh, imitating a Martin Luther King tone and cadence, right? We know that it's worked before. There's even a nostalgia to it. Been a long time since somebody tried to march out there on the activism and freedom stage and parrot the cadence of a Martin Luther King, almost because it's certainly disrespectful and it's strange to say the least. Talk like you talk. Don't talk like another man talked because it worked for him. That's strange as fuck, and it's really strange as fuck to see a bunch of black people and leftist activists jump behind him like he's the America's future. Right? This guy is a complete clown. And again, there is where the history of race and all of these things are being used in an illegitimate agenda. But let's talk about George Floyd for a moment, please. I know what happened. We all know what happened. You conservatives, you Republicans, many of you Christians have become pussies. You're pussy. And you don't like that? That offends you? If the shoe fits, if it doesn't fit, as I go on, if it doesn't fit, then it doesn't apply to you. But I feel the energy. The energy if I walk into a Republican congressional district and say, the problem with this country is the Republican Party's full of pussies. What do I mean by that? What do I mean? I'm not just saying it for my own health. I'm not just saying it because I like the way it sounds. I like to hear myself talk. I'm saying it because it's the fundamental issue in this party. And it's the fundamental issue in this country. The Republican Party, the conservative movement, the movement that most closely identifies with a more genuine and true peer relationship to the American Constitution and our fundamental ideals of freedom and inalienable rights, and ultimately God, we've abnegated one main cornerstone of such an ideology for one convenience: freedom for security. You're all pussies. You all want to believe that the police are protecting you. You all want to believe that the police were at, first of all, let's be clear. Our founding documents that we defend so often in the conservative movement were never, never written in a context of a police state. There were no police when the American Constitution was written. Why? Because such a thing would have been seen as unholy. Police? Well, we don't fucking need police. What do we need police for? That's why they're not in the Constitution. There is no law enforcement, no super police state in the Constitution. So, we talk about the Constitution all the time. We talk about our founding documents and all these things all the time. But we don't talk, and the left is totally willing to bring up the slavery context of our Constitution, and we're willing to rebut it. But when we come to the police, all of a sudden our brains short circuit. We cross wire. And it's so obvious why. You all are pussies. You all want the convenience of industrialism and consumerism and capitalism and all these other pretty posh things, but you want to talk about God and you want to talk about America. And the liberals and the Democrats continue to call your bluff and pull your card on your own weakness. Our enemy has put us in front of a mirror and said, you have to deal with your own internal weakness first before you could ever address us. Because they're okay with where they are. They're okay with the satanic and the demonic and the industrial and the technocratic and the tyrannical and authoritarian. They're fine with it. We are supposed to be the bastion that is fighting back, that has a problem with it, but we're standing in front of a mirror and we just can't get over certain little elements, certain little flaws, certain pitfalls right now. Let's try. Stop being a pussy. The police aren't going to protect you. The police aren't coming to save you. In fact, when the shit goes down, the police are going to be the ones who take orders and march door to door and become the biggest tyrant that you could have possibly ever imagined. That's the reality. So all this cuckery, all this cucking for police really is, I mean, it's embarrassing. It's fucking embarrassing, okay? The police aren't your fucking friend. Cut the shit. They're there to control and contain. They're there to clean up and contain. They're there to provide order and stability for the corporation, for the corporatocracy. They're there to discourage the uprise, what would be a rightful uprise of citizens who are being scammed by their government and their corporations every day. And many of you would agree with it, but you tend to not agree with it when it's talked about along race lines. For some reason, you would agree with it otherwise. You agree that the FBI is out of control. You agree that the CIA is out of control. You agree that the NSA is out of control, or the DOD, or the DIA, or whatever other intelligence committee. You would agree that all these federal institutes, the IRS, you would agree they're out of control. But when it comes to police, they're just doing their job. Do you really separate the police out from the intelligence community? It's all one military industrial complex. From your 4-star generals and your joint chiefs down to the heads of the intelligence community, down to your sergeants, and it's moral hazard. Okay, it's seeped throughout the entire complex of military, and it's a shortfall that we don't see a greater vision for this country. We don't have the courage to see the moral hazard in our wrongdoing and opt for a greater organization of human society, of this nation. We don't believe, we don't have enough faith in what it actually says in those founding documents to organize ourselves in a higher form, a more moral and ethical form of human organization. And in that human organization, we don't give our rights away so the police can protect us. And I love when Maj said it best, the people who make the argument, the reason why they can have a nice airport in Thailand or whatever, wherever, is because in some of these countries, they cane their citizens for petty crimes. That's authoritarianism. We don't give a fuck about the airports. We don't care how the airports look. That's the agrarian life. That's the agrarian life, a nation of shopkeepers versus the tyranny of the crown. And let's bring it to George Floyd for a moment. Let's hone it in. Because I hear it all the time. But George Floyd was on fentanyl. Yeah. And a lot of more people are going to be on fentanyl coming here shortly. And it's your corrupt DC uniparty elites that are pumping fentanyl into this country through the Mexican border. So that's not really a damning indictment, is it? Because the fentanyl epidemic is one that's coming down is coming down like a plague on our entire country, mostly our young people. But when it's a 40-year-old black man who already had a criminal history, now he's out of that pool. I mean, where is our sense of redemption? Where is our understanding that Mary of Magdalene used to service the men and take money for it? That Saul was a blasphemer and rejected God? That, go on down the list. That Jesus Christ himself walked and ministered to the lowest amongst us, the robbers and the thieves and the prostitutes and so on and so forth. That on the cross, it was a thief who actually accepted Christ right there in the face of death. Why do we lose sight of it? It just shows. It goes to show that we're the reason why we can't win in this country. Here in CD3, Congressional District 3, one of the one of the people or one of the groups of people that are in charge of CD3 thought that it was wise or that it's continuously wise to bring Liz Collins around and, sh- puppet her around and let her speak. And now if you don't know, Liz Collins in town is the wife of Bob Kroll, and Bob Kroll was the head of the police union. And their whole thing is the entire George Floyd situation was a hoax. You're willing to believe that. Now, am I saying that it maybe wasn't predetermined? Maybe. Am I saying that 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 it wasn't used ex post facto to forward a certain agenda? Maybe. All those things certainly have crossed my mind, no doubt. Am I a Roman citizen? Am I a Roman citizen? Are you allowed to bind and beat a Roman citizen who has not yet seen his day in court, who has not yet been convicted of a crime? Are you allowed to bind and beat a Roman citizen? Biblical. Am I a Roman citizen? Many of you have given up your citizenship for security because you're too pussy to go get a gun and learn how to shoot the gun. Take the time away from your fucking French fries and your goddamn headlines and your Fox News sound bites to go get a gun and learn how to shoot it. You protect your own fucking home, because I guarantee you this, most of the time by the time the cops get there, it's already too late. How many times did the cops preemptively save somebody from another person who actually wanted to do real violence and harm? How many times? Now, after the fact, they may stop a person from expanding the footprint of violence and carnage. That's possible. But that's a twofer. Yeah, they're stopping innocent people from being killed, but in the same way, they also protect the corrupt status quo from feeling the sense of danger as well. That's the impetus around January 6th and the way it was discussed. The people there in D.C. don't give a shit about freedom. They don't give a shit about the Constitution or America or democracy. They've sold the nation out to China. They continue to sell the nation out to China. They don't give a shit about this country. What they care about is their own safety, and they are a reflection of us. Their cowardice, the pussy in them, is a reflection from the pussy in us on both sides of the aisle. You want the police to protect you so bad. You want to know that the police are there waiting for your call so bad, and that their interest is really your immediate well-being so bad. You need that. You need that. And in that way, you're an American Karen. I don't give a fuck what side of the aisle you're on. You're an American Karen. And when you say things like, um, uh, George Floyd asked to be pulled out of the car and laid on the ground. So, what the fuck does that? What kind of rebuttal is that? Okay, he asked to be pulled out of the car. Have you ever been in the back of a cop car? It's fucking tight back there. It's tight. And if you're claustrophobic, that should have freaked you out. I've seen many people, black, white, Mexican, and different, freak out in the back of the cop car and be asked to be taken out, even when they're handcuffed and they know they have no chance of running away. And as you saw, George Floyd is a big man. He was probably a relatively strong man, but he didn't seem to be a very quick and agile man. He wasn't going to pull the hop over the cuffs and run away. He wasn't in the type of mental capacity to be able to do that. And anybody watching could see that. And I'm not saying that cops don't face immediate danger on a daily basis. And what I really, really hate is how black people try and deny the overwhelming evidence that on average, police officers increasingly face peril on routine traffic stops. Yeah, that's true. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. You can look up a number of times where police routinely pull somebody over on a traffic stop. The person has warrants or so on. So maybe the person's just a psychopath on drugs, whatever, and he lets some shots off through the door. We understand. And look, in this way, both sides create a moral hazard where the tension in those encounters is way well and beyond what it ever needed to be. Way over well and beyond what it ever needed to be. No doubt about that. There's no doubt about that. But when you have a man handcuffed with his hands behind his back, you've already determined he doesn't have a weapon, and he's laying down, face down on the ground, and he's saying, I can't breathe. Whether he's saying I can't breathe because the fentanyl is starting to shut down his respiratory system, or he's saying he can't breathe because you got your knee on his back, or a combination of the two, that's not that same situation. That's not the situation where you walk up to a car door and you don't know whether the driver is going to let a few shots off or not. That's not the same situation. So why do we even pretend or bring in all these other circumstances into the George Floyd situation? For all you people out there who say the knee was on his back, it wasn't on his neck, or a 160-pound man can't suffocate a 230-pound man in that way. Or, I really enjoyed this one, if you can't breathe, you can't say you can't breathe. You people are pussies. You're fucking pussies. You've never been in a fight. You've never had to defend yourself. You've never had to rely on your own survival skills in order to get out of a physical altercation or a dangerous situation. I can tell because you're saying shit that's fundamentally not true. And all these other white or black or Latino or whatever conservative pundits that go along with this bullshit narrative, I know you're pussies too. And even if you have been in survival situations, whether you're military, ex-cop, or you're trained in the martial arts or tactical hand-to-hand combat, whatever it is, if you go along with it, you're a pussy because you want the affirmation from the crowd rather than speak the truth. And it's that very piece, right? That little keyhole of the movement that the liberals keep sticking a universal key in, unlocking and stopping black people and Hispanics from waking up to see the broad totality of the scam going on in American politics. You people don't want to win. You're more interested in hearing a small cohort of constituents or consumers. You're more interested in hearing a small cohort of them clap like seals. A bunch of geriatric 70-year-old white folks, okay? That's the crowd you want clapping for you. And I get it. I don't have anything against the boomers. But I know the truth. I know the truth about what the boomers did to this country. And I know this streams on War Room, and there's a lot of boomers in the crowd, and we love our American boomers who are patriots and understand God, family, country. We love you, and we need you, and we need your continued support. But am I a Roman citizen? Am I a Roman citizen? Am I an American citizen? Some of you out there, I could put my knee on your back for 15 seconds and you'd pass the fuck out. Now, I know I'm a big man. I'm 250 pounds. But if a person is in the right position, like the prone position, face down, and somebody is putting all their weight, doesn't take much, putting all their weight on that person, not allowing their lungs to fully expand, it can compromise the cardiovascular and respiratory system. This is a physiological fact. Fuck sticks. It's not an argument, you dumb motherfuckers. I'm not arguing with you. It's not a debate. Stupid. Stop listening to Fox News. The fucking Finocchios on Fox News never been in a fist fight in their fucking life. They're pussies. Have you ever been at a birthday party when you were a kid and there was a kid who gets caught on the bottom of a dog pile? What's the first thing they do, Tanner? What do they do first? They scream, right? The first thing they do is they scream. And as long as they're down there in the pile, they scream until they can no longer scream. You'll hear, ah, get off me. And there's this sense of panic, right? Now, George Floyd's being on drugs that day may have even suppressed a certain level of panic and urgency. But at the end of the day, he was being held down by multiple people, and he was face down with his hands behind his back. So that panic and urgency and that sort of fight or flight kick would turn into just basic weeps or just moans and grunts. So yes, you can. You can actually scream out or yell out or say, I can't breathe as you're losing the ability to breathe. Very easy sequential deduction. When you don't do it, you prove you're too fucking stupid to be in the conversation. And that really hurts us. It hurts us when people who believe in God, family, and country show they're too fucking stupid to be in a basic conversation of critical thought and reasoning. Of course, as you lose the ability to breathe, many people often proclaim that they are having trouble breathing or they, in fact, cannot breathe. Don't make some stupid fucking corny deduction like, well, if he says he can't breathe, technically he can because he's still saying it. No, when people start to lose the ability to breathe, often they describe it as, I can't breathe. If you go to an ER and somebody shows up to the ER with a respiratory illness or a failed lung or a pulmonary embolism, oftentimes they will reference the sensation that they're feeling or the symptoms to the doctor or the nurse or the triage, I can't breathe. When in fact, they still can breathe reasonably, but their breathing may actually be compromised and in effect, eventually, in that very evening, fail them. And they may die and pass. And they actually couldn't breathe at a reasonable level to sustain health over the course of the next 24 hours. That happens. COVID, hello, can't breathe. So when you say, oh, he could breathe because he kept saying he couldn't breathe. Well, there was a moment in that video, a significant moment where there was a lot of time left where he stopped responding altogether. There was a moment in the video where he stopped responding altogether and he stopped saying, I can't breathe. He just stopped talking altogether. Maybe you didn't watch the video all the way because your pussy ass was too convinced that the police in the video would hopefully be protecting you in your community. But this is the reality. This is the reality. And you know what the big problem with it is? It's not even about George Floyd and how he was treated that day, or him being on drugs, or the convergence of circumstances that led to his eventual death. It's not even about that, really. This is about a much bigger issue that the conservative movement and the neocon movement and the rhino movement, by and large, have opted for a police state. And you want to pretend that the police aren't a part of that police state, that they're not the lowest rung, the first line of defense for the police state. You're always comfortable saying that there's this surveillance state, and this all happened during 9/11, and it's not by accident. It's not by accident. It's not lost on me that after 9/11, we were all so traumatized by 9/11. Don't get me wrong, I was traumatized by 9/11. But maybe it was just the way that I grew up. That 9/11 in no way ever predisposed me to be comfortable with the police state. Maybe it's because I'm a black man. I don't know. We didn't take 9/11 like that. The narrative coming out of 9/11 wasn't, oh, shit, Muslims are on the prowl. The Muslims are coming. So the police, we should give free rein. We have to. In fact, let's have the Israeli special forces teach our police counterterrorism. And you thought that that was for your safety? You thought it was for your safety when they sent people to Iraq and Fallujah and they were training our military men in martial law? You thought that that was to take, remember now, and I'm not trying to go off topic, but remember where this all stems from, or at least an explosion of police state, right? Militarization of policing. Remember that we went to Iraq under false auspices, and we sent a bunch of the same soldiers who we now have to acknowledge their sacrifice because they were sent into a battle under false pretenses. That's the cost of war. And yes, soldiers followed orders, and some of them followed orders well, with valor, with heroic performance, and so on and so forth. But the legitimacy of the war itself can't be The legitimacy of the war itself can't be validated by sacrifice or by people giving their lives ex post facto. That's not how it works. You can actually sacrifice your life in vain. And through the decision of many of our DC elites who sell this country out today, many of our soldiers gave their lives in vain. They gave their lives for an idea that the people who sent them to war never believed in themselves. And the war itself wasn't based on it. And we all know that now. If you're still shilling for the Iraq war, you're a pussy. Just come out and say it. Look yourself in the mirror and say, you know what? The Iraq war was a scam. Now we can get to what came from the Iraq war, the over-militarization of police. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Let's have the Israeli counterterrorism unit, special forces train our police. That's not an indictment of Israel. That's not an indictment of all the Jews. That's an indictment of the neocon elites who saw an opportunity to use Israel and their conflict with Palestine to further a police state here in the West, which may in fact be a part of a much larger agenda to normalize police states all around the world. And that's exactly what's happened here. And George Floyd was a symbol of that. And all of the racism and the cultural racism and the cultural Marxism and the white liberalism and the LGBTQism and the feminism and the Me Tooism. Every ism that lined up and stacked themselves on George Floyd's back certainly wasn't interested in that. And they're certainly not anti-police state. And they're certainly not worried about the prosperity of black people. But they don't change the fundamental wrong that was done to George Floyd on that day. And if you can't separate the two, you're probably a pussy. You're a pussy in real life, probably. But being a pussy in real life usually stems from being a pussy intellectually. Some of you are too pussy to even hear the word pussy. Some of you heard Donald Trump say, grab him by the pussy in locker room talk, and you thought, I could never vote for this man. Grab them by the what? Go caucus with the Democrats. Just go caucus with the Democrats. Get the fuck out of the way. Take you and your little poo-butt worldview, you and your little soft poo-butt worldview, and you go caucus with the fucking Democrats while we try and save this nation from what's really going on, from the real danger, from the real threat. And the threat is a police state. And many of you show you're willing to accept it. Separate it out. George Floyd, who he was in his life, the way that the media establishment and American political landscape tried to use his murder, and what actually took place on that day. Those are three separate things. And all of you should be worried. And I go back to the kneeling on the back thing because I think it's the most glaring, it's the most blatant one that shows people have no clue about the shit they're talking about. I can kneel on your back for 15 seconds and you can lose the ability to breathe. Ask any professional wrestler out there. Ask any professional grappler out there. Ask anybody out there who understands the amount of leverage and weight you can use or produce with your body in the right positions. And this would be if somebody was able to fight you off. Like there are wrestlers out there. I've been on the mats with heavyweight wrestlers that are so good, they actually create the sensation that I can't get enough oxygen, that I can't breathe, by just applying pressure, and I'm fighting them off. I'm actually trying to, what we call shrimp and grappling, we call it shrimp. I'm trying to shrimp away and fight the pressure off, and they're so good that I'm another 250-pound man, very strong, by the way, very, very strong, like legitimately strong, amongst strong. You get a group of strong men in a room, I'm going to be at the top. But the technique of applying pressure with somebody's body is something that wrestlers and grapplers have learned over a lifetime. And they can actually do it while somebody's actively trying to fight them off. So imagine how easy it is to do when somebody's on their stomach face down with compromised health already, probably high on drugs, with their hands cuffed behind their back. And you think for 8 minutes you'd be able to survive? You pussies be passing out every fucking 30 seconds. I know it. These are the same people who say athletes are playing a kids game, but you can't even get off your fucking couch to run on the treadmill for a mile. Like you could survive a full-length professional practice or any professional fitness activity, once a week, let alone 5 times a week and a game that lasts for 60 minutes to an hour, continuous, at the highest pace. You people aren't being realistic. You're letting the opposition shape your worldview. You're letting the opposition define you. You're letting the charlatans define your worldview. That's pussy. That's a lack of courage. That's a lack of sacred honor. Tell the truth. Whether you're white, black, Hispanic, Native, Asian, doesn't matter. If what happened to George Floyd happened to you, all conservatives who want a smaller government and reject the proposition of a police state should have been lining up, not only to say how wrong it was, which the late great Rush Limbaugh, even he was on the record like, yeah, this one is totally wrong. It's out of control. Because Rush saw it. Rush Limbaugh understood what it really meant. Now, does Rush understand how there's a legitimate crime issue in many black communities? Yeah. Does he understand how the media tries to use black and white cop relations to further agenda? Yeah. But when you're looking at it with your own 2 eyes, you go, that is wrong. There's no doubt about it. Rest in peace to the late, great Rush Limbaugh, way ahead of his time, way on the money about so many things. Disagree with him on some things, yeah. I disagree with anybody on some things. Everything, when you agree with somebody on some things or a majority of things or whatever percentage of things, that doesn't mean that you have to agree with them on every single thing. This is the American culture just becoming intellectually lazy, intellectually handicapped. Pussy. I know you don't like to hear it. Pussy. This country's become pussy. It is what it is. My ears, the vulgar language. You're scared of vulgar language, but you're not afraid of a militarized police coming to knock on your door and drag you out of your house and put their knee on your back for 8 minutes. What kind of delusional world are you living in? What kind of delusional world have you concocted in your head? The police state. It's here, ladies and gentlemen. And not only is it here, it's expanding. It's expanding because many people would much rather choose the security, the fake security, mind you. It's not real security. The fake security of a police state than the real security of freedom. Just lazy. Get a gun, learn to shoot. It's not hard. It's not hard. It's actually not hard. Why would you want to wait for police to respond that are already underfunded, under-personneled, under-resourced? Why would you want to wait for them to protect you in the event that somebody breaks in your home or that somebody tries to rob you or carjack you or whatever the case may be? Why? Why would you want to wait for that? You're too afraid to learn to handle a gun? This is what the Democrats want. You're playing right into their hands. You're playing right into their hands when you say, and even furthermore, what you're really doing when you bring a Liz Collins into a CD3 congressional, what do they call it? A congressional, what do they call it? Congressional convention or whatever the case may be. When you bring a Liz Collins in who says the whole George Floyd deal was a hoax, George Floyd died of fentanyl, that's all. He couldn't have possibly suffocated. You're killing us. You're killing the party. You're killing America. You're killing the nation. You're providing the shoddy, lukewarm, bullshit controlled opposition rhetoric that keeps people out of the party. Why? Why? It's like a kid shooting the ball at his own basket. You know, I'm coaching a 6th grade team. When you see a kid shoot, it's just, you understand people get mixed up. But the Republican Party shoots so many balls at our own basket. It's scary. I'm just watching you turn back to your own hoop and shot, shot, shot. Some of them are bricking. Some of them are out of control because you're not even fit enough. You're too fat to actually shoot the ball with some real athleticism. Balls bouncing all over, some going over the backboard. But every once in a while, one's dropping in, and you're just going, why? Stop shooting the ball at your own hoop. Are you fucking dumb? You're shooting the ball at your own hoop. Stupid. It's stupid. It's dumb. It's an indefensible position. Derek Chauvin is a pussy. He's a pussy. Now, I'll give you this. Was Derek Chauvin, Derek Chauvin, I don't know what the fuck, I don't know. It's French, I don't know. Was Derek Chauvin the scapegoat, the convergence and then scapegoat of an American political landscape for a much, much greater cause? Yes. And we should all be worried about that as well. Because many of us could in turn become the scapegoat of a much bigger political circumstance as well. Absolutely. Yes. Derek Chauvin was the reason why he was prosecuted as quickly as he was, the reason why he was given the sentence that he was, the reason why he was treated the way that he wasn't because anybody really thought that what happened to George Floyd was unjust. Wasn't because anybody thought that we should start to shrink the authority or power of the police state. No, that's all a lie. It was never about that. It was to create the thin veil, the fake catharsis of peace in a city that was on fire. Do I think that it was right for people to burn the city of Minneapolis in response to George Floyd? Or even furthermore, the COVID lockdowns? Because remember, you have to acknowledge the combination of the George Floyd situation happening a month after the lockdowns began. The lockdowns began in mid-March. I remember like it was yesterday, my little brother and sister were both in the Minnesota State tournament. The lockdowns began in around mid-March. They started to kick up in April. By the end of May, people had been locked down for 8 weeks with uncertainty, frustration, fear. So yeah, it was George Floyd, but people were looking for a reason to go outside. And you could even make the case, you could even make the argument that in that way, maybe the George Floyd thing was planned. Maybe the government wanted to know, if we lock an entire population down, what could we get away with and still keep them in their homes? And for that reason, I found it productive that people were willing to throw off the lockdowns to come outside. And I found it strange that so many conservatives never mounted an equally sizable demonstration or anti-lockdown demonstration. I found that odd. Because lockdowns per capita were way more tyrannical than what happened to George Floyd. The lockdowns were far and away more tyrannical than what happened to George Floyd. The fact that what happened to George Floyd happened in conjunction with the lockdowns was just too much to bear. I had to hit the front lines. This shit is out of control. You want us to stay in our homes while cops are going to kneel on the back of a man who's saying he can't breathe for 9 minutes? Go fuck yourself. I'm going to show up at the Fed. Now, I'm not going to show up to City Hall or the police precinct and tell people to burn the place down. The whole system is guilty. No, I'm going to show you where the system is most guilty. Let's take a walk to the Fed. And were there any conservatives or Republicans that showed up? Not many. No. No, when we actually ask people to bow their heads and pray, the majority of the people that bowed their heads and actually engaged in the prayer were black people. The white liberals from Minneapolis that came out in bigger number, far greater number, they bowed their head out of respect, probably out of a faux, self-loathing white guilt that black people are leading this and we're going to bow to black people in some weird sycophantic white guilt, I don't know. I don't know what it is. White guilt, white supremacy, really. Yeah, they bowed their heads, but they didn't really say the Lord's Prayer. But the black people were saying the Lord's Prayer. But where were all the other Christians? Listening to Fox News. That's where you were. Listening to Fox News. Scared to come out with your Bible. Scared to minister. Same problem we've been having in this country for a long, long time. That's why Minneapolis, in the belly of the beast, a ministry of truth into the belly of the beast, not a ministry like Joe Biden, an actual ministry. Some of you don't even know what ministry really means. So when the left and the liberals co-opt the word ministry, Joe Biden goes, we're going to create a ministry of truth for the internet. You just reject the word ministry altogether. You see how you get co-opted so often when you define yourself by the opposition? Ministry is one of the most important things in Christian evangelical life. What is your ministry like? Now, I took a ministry into the belly of the beast. Now, I'm from the Twin Cities, so it wasn't hard for me. But I was willing to stand up in front of a bunch of people who I didn't know what their political views were really. I wasn't initiated into this whole political, this whole political culture at the grassroots level before the George Floyd deal. I knew by and large that people were willing to get co-opted psychologically by big tech and the media industrial complex because I experienced that firsthand. But when it came to policing issues and things like that, I wasn't really initiated in all the ways, all the many nuances that it was being corrupted and misused. So I didn't run from it. In my lack of knowledge, I didn't shy away or resign from it. I didn't say, let's stop talking about it altogether. Let's find something better to do. No, I went and stuck my hands in the shit. I had to get a feel for it. I had to understand what we're dealing with. That's how I found out that the LGBTQ feminism and Me Too movement was in league with the Judeo-Buddhist vegan shaman cokehead movement with a bunch of black bourgeoisie elites who all want to undermine this country. That's how I was able to diagnose it. But as I was diagnosing it, as I was getting a first-hand, first-row look at this panoply of corruption and decay of American culture, I noticed one glaring absence. Where were all the Christians? Where were all the Christians to rebuke and refute? Where were all the Christians to rebuke and refute? I did a lot of rebuking and refuting on my own. Again, pussy. And you want to question me about the George Floyd and everything. You want the police to protect you. Get ready. It's coming. Go read Schultz and Nitzen. Go read about when states become totalitarian. Go read who takes the marching orders. Go read what it was like the day before the tyranny came down and how swift it came down and how precise it was executed. Go ahead and read it. Or you probably won't because you want to continue to live in the lollipop land that the police are protecting you. You stay in that place if you want to. The rest of us who really believe in American freedom, who believe in a nation of shopkeepers fortified by the Second Amendment, we're going to get guns and we're going to learn how to use them if need be in a violent circumstance. And we're learning how to use them responsibly or how to carry them and keep them responsibly. I lived in Pennsylvania. I had 2 guns. I had a gun stolen from my house in Pennsylvania. I was moving around. I had 2 or 3 firearms that I had to leave in Texas because I moved to Pennsylvania and there's all these laws about carrying firearms across state lines without a certain permission. But I was traded so quick that I had to get up and go. You got to go. Another way how when you're a professional athlete, you could easily get caught doing very basic things and find yourself in trouble. Not in a Ja Morant way, in a real genuine way. Like, hey, I live in Houston. I own 5 firearms. I have to go and be in Philadelphia in the next 2 days. What do I do with these firearms? Who do I leave them with? Left them with somebody who I knew. Disappeared. Probably sold them. I don't know. Lost custody of them. Had to report them stolen. This is the reality of firearms. Yeah, stuff happens. Stuff gets lost. Stuff gets stolen. Okay. Is the prospect of a firearm being out there without the proper chain of custody worth our freedom? And if it is, that's when you've given up your freedom for security, and it makes you a pussy. Okay, enough of the police state. Let's get to the nitty-gritty on reparations. Because, this is the number one. This is the number one. Oh, my God, reparations. Now, again, I'll say to start in case you weren't here in the beginning. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to propose that all white people, which is an identity that can't even really be pinned down with any real logic or reason, that all white people would pay an extra tax to all black people, I guess, or descendants of slavery, foundational black Americans, that they would pay a tax for reparations. That's ridiculous, okay? If that's part of anybody's reparations plan, you know that they're of the Eli Mistal LGBTQ neoliberal omnisexual community, because it's just stupid on face value. But let's talk about reparations. Let's have a real conversation about it. Because I see it all the time. I'm not paying. I'm not paying for something I didn't do. My family didn't have slaves. I wasn't there. I'm not paying. Well, first of all, let's be clear about what you're willing to pay. You're willing to pay for your corrupt DC elites to finger fuck you. You're willing to pay for your DC elites to bend you over your dining room table and take everything that you own. Take your kids' future. Take the very essence and freedoms of this nation. You're willing to pay for that because you paid for it. You're willing to pay for a police state. You're willing to pay for a surveillance state where your own government feels it's okay to spy on you and surveil you against your will with some backdoor provision and workaround and little wormhole into black operations, right? You're willing to pay for that. You're paying for it. You're paying for your own surveillance, like a rat in a maze, like a hamster on a hamster wheel. You're paying for your own slavery right now. You're paying for your own slavery. Forget paying back somebody else for the slavery that happened in reparations. You are currently paying for your own slavery, upwards of 50% in taxes. You're paying for it. What else are you willing to pay for? You're willing to pay for the Federal Reserve to bail out Wall Street. You don't have some huge rejection against that. You're willing to pay for our schools to teach our kids that having a penis doesn't make you a man, or that every living person passed through a woman. I love when A.J. Barker says, you want to know how to define a woman, that's how you define it. Every single person on this planet came from one. Boom. But you're willing to pay for that. You're willing to pay to have your antibiotics and many, many other essential goods manufactured in the most godless, tyrannical, by the most godless and tyrannical regime in human civilization, in the history of human civilization. You're willing to pay for that. Oh, you paid for that. Oh, you want to talk about fentanyl? Guess what? You paid for that too. You see how it comes full circle? I don't mean to laugh and mock you. I'm just tired of it. I'm tired of it. Either we're going to save this country, or the few of us that want to speak the truth and actually get something done, we'll die in martyrdom, I guess. Okay, fine. Let me be the lone conservative voice out here who never had this huge broad following like a Candace Owens or a Matt Walsh or whoever else you want to fucking pick. I don't know. Don't give a fuck about these people, really. Not that I don't like them. Not that they don't say some real stuff, some true stuff, right? It's just that every few statements, they have to add in a kernel that they know will draw on the worst of the movement. And that is what they do. They pander. But we don't have time for pandering. We are suffering from a crisis of leadership and a crisis of sacred honor. And we're going to need both. And when you're a real leader, you don't say the thing that you know people will like. You say the thing people need to hear. That would be the difference of a materialist Darwinist or social Darwinist leader and a Christ-driven leader. I'll say it again for the pussies in the back. The difference between a Christ-driven leader and a Darwinist, social Darwinist, radical materialist leader, one is going to speak the truth no matter who the crowd is, because that's the truth that needs to be spoken. The other is going to say just enough of what they think the crowd will accept. The soft bigotry of low expectations. Maj and I spoke about it on Friday. Many conservative pundits, they engage in the soft bigotry of low expectations that you can't organize yourself by a higher moral and ethic calling. You can't do it. So the best we can hope for is to get you aligned along the least evil premise of political worldview. And here we come to reparations. You're willing to pay for a lot of shit. And here's the kicker. In my reparations proposal, you wouldn't be paying anything. So who's against reparations now? Well, how's that going to happen? Of course I'm going to pay for it. Somebody always has to pay for it. No, stop. You believe in the security of the monetary institutions. You believe in the security of monetary policy. You believe in the fake game of fiat currency. It's fake. It's fake. Everything that we've paid for up until this point is backed by one thing and one thing only. The full credit of the American people and the might of the American military. The credit. Not cash, not liquid. The credit of the American people. Would you rather, Tanner, pay some black folks, would you rather use the Fed and the private banks that make up the Fed to create a program where black people can opt in to reparations and get reparations to kickstart or rebuild American manufacturing, or keep paying the Chinese to make your Z-Pack? It's real easy. Would you rather spend some money that doesn't even come from you, comes from the Federal Reserve institution that's already taking your fucking money, that you use America's political system and America's vote and America's we the people constitutional power to force our financial institutions that you've cucked for like nobody's business, right? Like there's some god of money, because really you want a piece of it. You want in. If you can get in, you'd get in. Because they're keeping you out, that's really the only that's really the life spring of your resent or your rejection. It's not that you actually are disagreeing with the corruption itself. It's that you can't get a piece. If you could get a piece, you'd sell your ass in a minute. Many of you. If it don't apply, it don't apply. If you can't handle the truth, go ahead and fuck off. Go fuck yourself. Because there's no way we've allowed the Federal Reserve and the rest of the federal government to get this out of control and bastardize our citizenship and our currency the way they have, unless we selfishly wanted a fucking piece of it. And our inability to rise up and unite against such corruption is solely based on we would much rather keep the ambition and the dream and hope alive that one day we could get in on it. Pussy. I could smell it on you. That's why I don't have no big following like some of these other conservative pundits, because you can't come to this part of the mat. You can't come to this part of the board with any of that boo-boo, with any of that foo-foo or woo-woo. That's a little ebonics for bullshit, okay? You can't come over here with that bullshit. I don't need it. I'm not in a position to need it. Sorry. All I'm here to do is save the nation, and we're going to get right down to business. Would you rather repatriate, renationalize, reconcile a very blatant wrongdoing in history? Okay. A slavery, drugs, and piracy business model from the crown that we are so unwilling to defect from in totality. Okay. Slavery, drugs, piracy, drug model, blood model, yeah, same thing, business model. Would you rather reconcile and create a 40 million American citizen force that both understand and are self-interested in the survival of this nation? Or would you rather keep giving all your money to the CCP? And all of you want to act like this isn't the juxtaposition, like this isn't the dichotomy, like this isn't the choice before us. This is the choice. And many of you harbor such subtle, hidden racism against black people still do. You harbor such racism against black people, you'll use Asian people. This is crazy. You'll use Asian people in your example of how American immigrants can come to this country and be successful. You heard that before? Where they talk about how well the Asian community does in school versus black people. You'll use that. You see how you've been co-opted? You see how you've bought into the narrative that the Chinese are the great new horizon? You see how you've been told that Ronald Reagan is the saint of the Republican Party? War on drugs. Bang, gotcha. War on drugs. Police state. 40 million person voting constituency to the Democrats. And all of you love Ronald Reagan. Oh, you get so hard on Ronald Reagan. It's fucking embarrassing. Ronald Reagan did some good things. A lot of presidents do some good things. Some presidents are more personable than others. Some of them you just like Barack Obama. He spoke well. He's charismatic. You can't help but just kind of like him. When you really get underneath the surface and find out who he is, I would hope that all of those superficial preferences for a person would fade away. That's sacred honor. I don't care how good you rap, what you rap. The question is, who are you and why are you doing what you're doing? And I can go right now to Bohemian Grove on Wikipedia, and the top picture is none other than Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon. Right there at Bohemian Grove, the epicenter of San Francisco omnisexual metropolitanism. Satanism, let's be honest. They're Satanists. You couldn't pay me as a potential political candidate to go to a place, a secret society full of Satanists. I don't give a fuck who's going. I don't give a fuck who's going to be there. I don't give a fuck what they're talking about or what potential support I could get or donations or what. I don't give a fuck. I'm not going to meet with Satanists. Want nothing to do with them. If you don't think that Bohemian Grove is a satanic secret society, you think the police are protecting you. You think the police are going to save you. You think the NSA is really out there just surveilling the American people to try and thwart radical Islam. And I'm saying it because this is not an anomaly, I don't think. This isn't like a small subset of the Republican Party or the conservative America. This is a widespread contagion in the ideology of conservatives. These motifs, these are the things that we have convinced ourselves are real. That Ronald Reagan was a saint? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Who was around him? Who was all around? Who was around him? Well, Captain Spook, the sine qua non of globalism in Spooksville, Herbert Walker Bush, George Bush, Herbert. Those are the people that were around Reagan. Globalists, Satanists, secret society, skull and bones, Bohemian Grove. I mean, you want to say it's a conspiracy theory, but yet Daddy Bush, skull and bones, Ronald Reagan, Nixon, Bohemian Grove. I don't know. You won't find a picture of Royce White being at the Masonic Lodge. You won't find a picture of Royce White being with the Prince Hall Masons. You won't find a picture of me getting a little pin or a little award from Bohemian Grove. They would never even invite me for a reason. I mean, how do you even get invited to something like this? These people watch you, they test you, they want to know whether or not you'd be amenable to work with. Type of energy I put off, they know I don't have a price. That's why I told the NBA to fuck off in the beginning. I sent the message to all the Satanists. There's no price. Because if a young black man isn't willing to take all the spoils that comes from an NBA lifestyle, there's probably not a price you could pay, right? If a young black man that comes from a blue-collar community in the heart of St. Paul, Minnesota, won't take the spoils of an NBA career, an all-star NBA career, might I add you, one where you're articulate and you're what do they call it? You're marketable. If you won't take the spoils of that, then you really don't have a price. I drew a line in the sand. Stay away from me or kill me, one or the other. Let me talk about freedom or come get me, one or the other. No in between. A lot of you want to play the fence. And I feel well positioned, uniquely leveraged in my sacrifice, in my social sacrifices, such as an NBA career, to be able to look out at the field and tell you who's real and who's not. No, I don't need to name names today, but I'm giving you the motif. The motif is this subtle yet blatant sellout for a security state, for a military-industrial complex, for a police state, for a racial division. Reparations. I would really love nothing more than to create a reparations program that allowed black people to opt in to a self-sustaining manufacturing upstart rebuild in this country that we would eventually let white people into and whoever else as well. Yeah. America's manufacturing rebuild is the most vital national security threat in the nation right now. For American citizens, rebuilding our manufacturing base is far and away the biggest issue in the country. No doubt. It's not even close. To build this nation's manufacturing and tell the EPA and the pollution advocates to go fuck themselves is maybe the most dire issue in the country today. How do we do it? How can we do it? What happened to Detroit? What happened in Pittsburgh? What happened in Cleveland? What happened in Milwaukee? What happened in Cincinnati? What happened in upstate New York? What happened to the manufacturing in this country? Who were the workers at the manufacturing plant? This is what Steve Bannon is trying to tell you about George Floyd. Look at the circumstance of his life. Why didn't he have a high-paying, high-value manufacturing job? Why didn't he own a home? What is the precursor of being on drugs in the first place? And I'm going to tell you, at a point in time when Reagan was in office, when Nixon was in office, when Kissinger was in office, they talked that race shit. They talked that unity globalism shit. But ultimately, they were willing to sacrifice. They were willing to sacrifice a huge component of America's constituents, the black constituents, that would eventually lead much of culture, because black people are creative and resilient like that. Now all of your white children want to dance to Playboy Cardi and Little Uzi Vert, who you don't even fucking know. You sycophantic neocon rhino boomers. You don't even know who your grandkids are listening to. I do. I know the little satanic artists and influencers and homosexual, omnisexual metropolitans who your grandchildren are following. I'm watching them do the TikTok videos. I'm watching them on Instagram. I'm watching them. I know who they're following. You don't. Some of them black, but heavily influenced by hip hop culture and hip hop music and black fashion and things like. Heavily influenced by the culture. Well, the primary reason that black people have monopolized the culture is because they were shepherded into a shooting gallery where that's all they had access to. And that wasn't by accident. This is what made Kanye West profound, despite the many flaws in some of his other presentations, when he said black people are obsessed with brands because they don't own land. Well, why don't black people own land? What's the prerequisite for land ownership? And we're going to get going here. I'm not even close yet. What's the prerequisite for land ownership? What was the precursor for black people being kept out of land ownership? The promise of 40 acres and a mule, the lack of reparations after slavery was abolished, and even furthermore, 1860 to 1960 is only 100 years. And during that 100 years, not only were black people not given adequate access to certain things like loans from the Federal Reserve, they were also strategically kept out of certain sectors of this unholy alliance between between corporate elites, political elites, and media elites. There's a whole little unholy alliance happening there, and you all know it. You all know it. Why do blacks not own land so they're obsessed with brands? Black people have been weaponized to be the cultural decay of this country. And black people need to understand that they've been weaponized, no doubt. And black people need to reject that weaponization, no doubt. But white folks in this country also need to understand that it's a ploy that was deployed against you, against your young children. You middle class, lower class, working class white folks out there who want to shill and opt for Fox News, whether you say it or not. Oh, I don't listen to Fox News. It's Rhino. It's fake. All you motherfuckers are still reading Fox News headlines. You can't lie to me. You can lie to somebody else. You can't lie to me. And even if you're not, whoever you're listening to, they're getting their orders from on high. It's the same neocon Rhino that just watered down a little bit for the controlled opposition, where you get far out to the right and we're talking about something completely different than we are on Fox News. No, you're not. This is different. This got a different tone to it. You know the difference. Now, you might reject the difference because deep down, again, you'd love for the Federal Reserve to let you in on the financial scam and the economic elitism. And your resent and rejection of them is only because you can't get a piece. It's not because you dislike the corruption categorically. Why weren't black people given land? Why were black people not given access to the loans needed to buy land? Well, let's go back to the beginning. What was needed in order to get a bank loan? What's needed to get a bank loan today? Collateral. Collateral's needed. You have to have collateral. Well, many black people don't have collateral because they don't own anything. Hello. They are in a perpetual hamster wheel of serfdom. And in this way, many people make the case that black people are still in effect slaves. The difference is they've expanded the slavery to many of you white folks too. Slavery was not only a pilot of psychological and physical bondage, it was also a pilot of economic and financial serfdom and bondage. Let's reverse engineer it. Let's go back. Let's go back and address the pertinent issue that the nation is in such a dire emergency, national security emergency, that it would be wise for us to forego this scam of collateral under a fiat system and just start to loan money that we're already printing on the faith of the American people and our military. We should just start to loan money to rebuild our nation, not to give to corporate cronies and oligarchs who are going to continue to send our money over to the CCP. Let's just go in and start to build manufacturing epicenters. Yeah, we may die of pollution. We might get cancer. But we're not going to be subjugated by an omnisexual elite there in Davos. And we're not going to be subjugated by an anti-God communist regime there in Beijing or anybody else who has the balls. We're not going to be co-opted by the traitorous petrodollar partners there in the Arab world. Not going to do it. Sorry. Canada and Mexico, better get your shit in order. Better get right. Better come to the table because we'll come knocking. And really, after the Mexican War, anyway, I think Mexico legitimately was supposed to be a part of America. We let Mexico stay Mexico. We won the war in the Texas War between the Texans and the Mexicans. We won that war. The South won that war anyway. So really, the United States won that war. So Texas was part of the right, but the United States won that war. We let Mexico continue to be Mexico. So really, Mexico has always been a part of America, and it's acted that way. It's behaved that way anyway. Canada is just, Canada's not really a place. And I'm not saying anything about the Canadian people, and I'm not saying anything about Canadian heritage or culture. All I'm saying is that the American military and the American Navy and the American weaponry sophistication protects and ensures the sovereignty of Canada. That's the reality. Europe can't protect Canada. We are in a dire national security situation, is what I'm saying. And it would behoove us to utilize black people in this country to the end means of preserving this nation. And it does two things at once. One, we create the manufacturing base, we empower ourselves, we create that self-sufficiently, and we reconcile on a debt and a wrongdoing that is legitimately there in our past. And the kicker is you don't even have to pay for it. My next political campaign, I'm going to run on three very distinct issues. 3 distinct issues. Number 1, term limits. Number 2, no taxes. Number 3, reparations. Now, if you see, number 2 already takes care of your fear about number 3. There are no taxes. We need to do away with the taxes. The taxes are a scam. The taxes themselves are a scam. So to tax white people to pay reparations would be a triple scam. We're not going to do it. We have a nation. We have natural resources. We have national resources. We have a military. We have innovation. We have technology. We have strategy and skill. We have leaders amongst us that are, for the most part now, hidden, but they will rise up and they will displace the corrupt leaders that stand now. And if we do that all at once, if we make one effort and one fell swoop to save this nation, we can do it. But we can't do it if we hold on to the petty animus towards a thing like reparations. Because guess what? The Democrats, they're outflanking you right now. They're going to outflank you on climate. They're going to outflank you on sex. They're going to outflank you on dopamine. They're going to outflank you on serotonin. They're going to outflank you on the corruption of religious institutions. They're going to outflank you on reparations. They're outflanking you with technology, with artificial intelligence. Right now, you have black women who are police officers in New York City. You won't know this because our episode 34 was taken down. But a black woman was used in a corrupt way to announce the unveiling of artificial intelligent robot police dogs. You see how it ties together? I'm trying to show you. I promise you, this isn't written down. The stuff I'm saying just rolls together. They use a black woman and they use race to unveil the fourth industrial revolution surveillance state of policing. Robot dogs. Robot patrol. In New York City, right now today. Boston Dynamics. Police dog. What do you think's coming next? We can use black people for that. But let's not manufacture our own goods. Let's not manufacture our own antibiotics. Let's not frack our own oil. Let's not make our own steel. Let's you know what? You know what we should do? Maybe it's safe for a military that is greatly built on steel. maybe we should continue to let the biggest steel importer be our greatest national rival. Maybe we should let the Chinese make all the essential metal for our military. Maybe that makes sense. Instead of giving black people a reparations program, instead of letting black people in and letting them invest in their citizenship, in their national interests by allowing them to rebuild the country again for a second time. Like Donald Trump said, you help build the country. He said it plain, just so plain, so honest. You helped build the country. You really did. We all did, but you had a big role in that. And you're just now starting to get credit for it. Joe Biden ain't saying that. How about we let black people make some steel? Black people, how about you? How about you take take that as not as a form of slavery, not as a new form of slavery, as an essential need so you don't lose the freedoms you fought for. Because while you were fighting amongst yourselves, while you were hanging on to the claim or the grievance of slavery, they are now going to transfer the power of this nation that you never really had a firm grip on or grasp on anyway to another nation that looks at you worse than white people do. The CCP and the Chinese, they look at black people way worse than white people do. There's this kind of love-hate relationship between white and black people, right? Even historically. Right, that's why you have a white slave owner who could beat a black man within an inch of his life, but then he has a bastard child by a black slave girl, right? There's a little love-hate there, right? But over there in the East, the CCP, oh, there ain't no love-hate. It's a hate-hate. It's a two-hate. There ain't no love in it because there's no God in it. The perversion even of God will yield a level of love and hate, a level of love and a level of redemption or hope that when you have no God at all, you couldn't hope to see or achieve. That's the real. There are plenty of murderers and robbers and thieves and people who were wayward and sinners and blasphemers in the Bible who came to know God and asked for forgiveness and became great people in the history of in history. Can't get rid of their sins. Only God can absolve them of that. But their actions going forward started to represent a more Christ-like or Christian lifestyle. When you have no God, no love can come. No hope can come. Eventually, you reduce everything down to suffering. You try to escape the suffering of your own doing without any faith in anything, and you end up being on record, like Yuval Noah Harari saying, there's going to be these useless, meaningless people. And we're going to have to give them drugs and video games because they're so meaningless. They're going to be so bored. They don't have anything else. I know something else we could give them. Let's task our people in this country with rebuilding the country and fortifying it and making this country's supply chain secure, making this country's infrastructure up to date, making this country's manufacturing base a source of revenue and income and prosperity so that black people can actually have land, so they won't be obsessed with brands, so they won't live in this sort of survivalist mentality, this radical materialist. When you have no home, when you have no land, when you live on a little plot, a little apartment building, a little project there in the Bronx, New York City, you know that you're a rat. You know that you're just a rat in a rat maze. You can feel that. Come on, let's not bastardize the human mind. When we bastardize the human mind and the human mind's understanding of their circumstance, we actually bastardize God. Human beings know. And that goes for big cities as well. Why are we living packed together in these big ass cities like we do? Spread out. We can't spread out because we have no manufacturing. We have no way to acquire land. Now, don't get me wrong. People are, commercializing and creating, what do they call them? They're creating developments. We're continuing to develop, right? Little suburbs. I get it. That's good. Let's ramp it up. Just like these people secession. Let's make it smaller. I got a different. Let's expand. You want America to be great? Let's let America be as great as it ever could be. We don't even know how great it could have been because we've let a few corrupt, financial, and political, financial, corporate elites dictate the terms of the game. The corporate elites are the ones telling us that China is the next big thing. The corporate elites are the ones who are telling us that the rise of China is inevitable. Our corporate elites are the one who make money, whose stock price increase, who net worth increased by the rise of China. The same corporate elites who fundamentally despise any type of, suggestion of a reparations package or an American manufacturing. Why are we going to pay we got to pay Americans too much to build coffee mugs. We got to pay Americans too much to manufacture antibiotics. We got to pay Americans too much to manufacture steel or whatever the case, or tires or whatever the case may be, whatever it is. We got to pay too much. No, we don't. The cost of living is inflated. The cost of living is inflated. I don't get what people, it's a scam. You're getting scammed. You're getting scammed on every front. We're giving away our national security because the cost of labor is too high. The cost of labor is too high because the Fed is inflating the price of the cost of living by destroying the value of the dollar. You're getting played on three fronts, and you want to argue about George Floyd, reparations, and racism. We better get it together right now. Term limits. No taxes. Reparations. The American Jubilee. That's what I'm going to run my next campaign on. The American Jubilee. Term limits. Don't let these corrupt politicians sit in D.C. for 40 years and get rich from insider trading or whatever the case may be. No taxes. The whole tax system is a goddamn scam. Okay? It's a complete and utter scam. We have the resources, we have the materials, we have the skills to make sure that our national interests are serviced properly, right? Of course, our military is going to continue to have everything it needs. Of course it is. Of course it is. Reparations. Let the black people go out and get their own sovereign land which the government rightly has a hand in, which is why all you fucking cucks pay property taxes, inordinate property taxes that would have made a Thomas Paine and George Washington roll over in their grave. The amount of money you pay for property taxes today. Okay. Let black people go and get land, sovereign land. Let them have some land. Let them have some sovereign land and create the partnership with these new sovereign black communities to build America's manufacturing, to create an independent, self-sufficient nation. Let them invest in their own security. Because if our borders are invaded, that means their new sovereign land gets invaded. It's very fucking simple. And the people who won't explain it to you like that or propose it like that, you have to question their motives. This has been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy. Please call me crazy. Brought to you by Free People Radio and now powered by our first sponsor, TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody, you might as well buy them from us. Help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement. That's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you. Tires. Most of the rubber, most of the tires, I think it's like 80% of the tires here in America are manufactured where? In China. We have to change that. It's a matter of national security that an essential good like tires, okay? If somebody invaded, do you know how supplies get moved? Yeah. Railroads, but also trucks. Okay? Trains and trucks. Now, if you bomb the railways, then you're left with trucks. You're going to need trucks to move supplies, just like we saw during the pandemic. Now, imagine if China just turned the tap off on all the tires. Or imagine if they start to overcharge us for the tires. Or imagine if, God forbid, they give us the tires for an even cheaper cost. So all of our corporate elites who are cucks and greedy, they continue to trade our freedom over to China for security and materialism. And we slowly get marched into a gulag or a re-education camp like the Uyghurs did because they have They have masterfully capitalized on price. Bring the price low. That's what the Chinese did. That's how they're beating us. They're masters of price. They brought the price down lower than anybody else in the market. This was the weaponization of free market enterprise. We didn't see it. Four-dimensional chessboard. Yeah, we all love free market enterprise until we don't put the proper boundaries and borders on it. And then all of a sudden, the idea of free market enterprise that Kissinger and those guys wanted to take into China gets weaponized against us. Now they have the lowest price, and the entire world is going to opt for tyranny and authoritarianism, totalitarianism, instead of freedom, instead of inalienable rights, because of price. Well, what is price? What is the reduction of human life? What is the reduction of existence down to price? That's Marxism, ladies and gentlemen. How do we fight it? Things like borders help fight it. Things like national identity and sacred honor help fight it. A non-radical materialism worldview like Christ and suffering and obeying God, those things help fight it. So can we put down the petty bullshit? Can we put down trying to shill for Derek Chauvin in the police state and just say what it is? Yeah, George Floyd, that's tragic. Murder, killed. Am I a Roman citizen? Do we want a police state like they have in China? No, we don't. No, we want a nation of shopkeepers that's fortified by the Second Amendment. The way we do it, we have to restart America's manufacturing. If we do that, and if we do it urgently, we can save this nation. Term limits, no taxes, reparation, the American Jubilee. We need some real ideas now, and I hope you guys are open to them. I appreciate your viewership and your listenership today and in the future, and as always, the fight continues. Godspeed.